Right now, Earth is splitting into two realities, two frequencies of the same planet. And the real question is not who is righteous, who is deserving, or who has earned a place. The real question is, are you tuned to the frequency that is already shifting? Are you among the chosen, not by merit, but by resonance? This is the axis of everything I want to say to you today. Are you among the chosen? Discover why Quantum Earth is selecting the 1%. Picture a radio dial. For decades, the station has been steady. The same voices, the same ads, the same static between songs. Suddenly, another station appears on the same dial, a channel carrying an entirely different language of experience. It is not louder, it is not obvious to everyone. Only those whose receiver is already set to that band hear it clearly. If you have felt reality tilt beneath your feet, if time has started folding in on itself in ways you cannot neatly explain, if ordinary life seems to leak into strange, intimate synchronicities, then you are already noticing the new broadcast. You are already receiving. Let me be clear about language from the start. When I speak of quantum here, I am using it as a model, as an interpretive lens, a set of metaphors collected from physics, from poetic insight, and from spiritual traditions that have long described reality as layered. Some scientists suggest frameworks like many worlds interpretations or subtle field resonances as ways to think about multiplicity. I borrow that vocabulary because it helps us map an experience many of you are living. This is not a lab manual. It is a map for the heart and nervous system. So what do I mean by Quantum Earth? Imagine the same planet vibrating at multiple rates at once, like a building sending out different harmonics when struck. In one harmonic, daily life continues as it has. Schedules, linear time, obligations that keep things dense. In another harmonic, call it Quantum Earth, perception shifts. Time becomes elastic. Relationships rearrange around essence rather than habit. And reality responds more directly to the coherence of the field. The split is not literal geography. You do not board a shuttle. It is a bifurcation in frequency bands, the difference between an AM station and an FM station, between a slow vinyl and a newer high-speed format. The difference is resonance. This is not about worthiness. This is not about moral ranking or divine favoritism. Selection in this context is vibrational. Some consciousnesses, individuals, families, clusters of people, are organically aligning with a bandwidth that is increasingly coherent, spacious, and yes, lighter in its density. That alignment moves them out of one kind of shared field and into another. The small number, the 1% we speak of, are not chosen by a gatekeeper in the sky. They are simply those whose inner oscillation has found a match with the emergent template. Think of it like a tuning fork. If your tone matches the fork's pitch, the fork will vibrate in sympathetic resonance with you. No moral dossier required, just resonance. Why is this bifurcation happening now? There are reasons, layered and overlapping, not reducible to any single explanation. Here are the core mechanics as I see them, using language that blends poetic metaphor with models from both science and ancient prophecy. First, vibrational incompatibility. Systems seek coherence. When the collective field begins to vibrate in a different register, those who remain at vastly different frequencies experience dissonance. Just as a choir with one voice off-key creates an audible strain, the planet's field reorganizes to reduce systemic friction. This is not punitive, it is mechanical. It is resonance seeking resonance. Second, sovereign choice. Souls are not inert. Consciousness manifests choice, sometimes quietly, sometimes decisively. Many people are choosing, on levels that feel like intuition or deep soul memory, to inhabit a reality where their internal frequencies align with different possibilities. Choice here is not coercion. It is the exercise of agency. Some are choosing to remain in denser settings to complete specific contracts. Others are choosing to move toward a lighter coherence to serve a different function. Third, cosmic timing. The rhythms of the heavens and long cycles, the precessions, the subtle shifts in solar and galactic fields, have historically been read by seers as windows of transformation. Ancient traditions, from the Hopi to the Vedic sages to certain Christian prophetic strains, all describe moments when the outer cosmos lines up with inner readiness, opening corridors of possibility. Some scientists model slow, periodic oscillations in planetary fields. Some spiritual lineages describe windows of accelerated consciousness. Both are useful metaphors, pointing to this: timing matters. Fourth, dimensional mechanics. If you accept, for the sake of mapping experience, that density can be described as a quality of relation, how tightly information is bound into sequential time, then a move toward less dense states involves different rules. In third density, cause and effect feel fixed. In fifth density modes, a shorthand for a kind of heart-led, non-linear living, cause and effect are more contingent upon coherence and collective field resonance. The mechanics of interaction change. Relationships become more about energetic fit than about shared history. Fifth, field coherence thresholds. Fields have thresholds. A relatively small percentage of coherent nodes can tip a morphic field, making particular patterns easier to instantiate for others. Think of the 1% not as an isolated cast, but as a set of stabilizing anchors. Their presence shifts the likelihoods available to larger groups, like a handful of musicians tuning an orchestra by pitches that then spread. Each of these layers is incomplete alone. Together, they compose an emergent story: quantum selection by frequency. Again, this is not a judgment. It is an explanatory model for a phenomenon many of you have already felt. If this is starting to resonate, then let me give you something practical: a checklist. I will read 8 signs that indicate you may already be migrating, that your system is sliding into a different harmonic. These are not diagnostic categories, they are invitations to recognize yourself and to stop pathologizing the strangeness that has likely landed in your life. First, timeline fluidity. You notice time speeding up, slowing down, folding. Projects you thought would take years collapse into weeks. A conversation's meaning stretches backward and forward. You find yourself remembering things as if they happened in a different order, or you sense outcomes before the usual causal chain completes. Time becomes elastic. Life feels less like a procession and more like an accordion of moments. Second, personalized reality. Synchronicities shift from being occasional curiosities to a steady stream of meaningful meetings, numbers, and coincidences that feel custom-made for your inner process. The world stops being a backdrop and begins acting like an intimate correspondent, sending confirmations and nudges tailored to your frequency. Third, dimensional bleeding. Dreams feel real enough to leave traces in waking life. You wake up with knowledge that appears to come from another field. People you barely know remember moments you can't place. Physical sensations precede decisions. The membranes between states thin. Fourth, soul memory awakening. Names, songs, gestures, or places trigger an inexplicable ache of recognition. Not nostalgia for a past life told in story, but an inner resonance as if your deeper self is remembering a curriculum. You find that mythic templates appear in your life with uncanny timing. Fifth, heightened energetic sensitivity. Your nervous system calibrates differently. Crowds wear you out in new ways. Silence feels restorative. You detect micro-moods in rooms, register emotional currents in others, and sometimes feel physically sensitive to electromagnetic environments or weather. Sixth, relationship restructuring. Close ties shift abruptly. Friendships end, partners change, family roles evolve. Some relationships gently dissolve. Others intensify into new forms of intimacy, based less on history and more on energetic reciprocity. This is not failure, it is reconfiguration. Seventh, a nameless pull. There is a direction in you cannot yet describe. It is less an intention and more a magnetic field pointing towards something unknown. It feels like home that you cannot yet name. Eighth, resonant recognition upon hearing the transmission. When you hear a phrase, a voice, or a concept that maps a previously unnameable interior, you feel a powerful immediate yes, as though a lock clicked open. That recognition is its own kind of proof. If more than 2 or 3 of these ring true for you, take that as validation, not doom. If none resonate, that is also fine. Reality contains multiple timelines and each has dignity. But if some of these signs are present, you are likely experiencing something real and ripe for deliberate navigation. If this resonates and if you recognize the signals, type in the comments, "I recognize the signals." I offer that request not as a ritual of power, but as a simple act of community signal carrying. When you type that phrase, you are not binding cosmic law. You are making an energetic mark in a collective morphic field. That little inscription matters because fields respond to pattern. Consider it a way of saying, "I hear it, I witness it, I am present." One line, one pulse, one visible anchor. Now, assuming you are among those who recognize the signals, the next question is practical. How do you stabilize? If you are moving into a less dense bandwidth, the body, the relationships, and the nervous system will demand new skills. Here are 7 keys, not commandments, but practices, designed to help you inhabit higher coherence without losing footing. For each key, I will offer a micro-practice, a small, repeatable gesture you can embed into daily life. Key 1. Release density. The old forms, attachments, and thought structures that feel heavy must be surrendered. Release is not abandonment, it is unbinding. Micro-practice. Once a day, for 3 slow breaths, imagine a heavy object attached to your chest. On the exhale, visualize loosening the knot and letting the object float free. Notice the sensation of lightness. Do this before a decision or a conversation that feels charged. Key 2. Practice presence beyond sequential time. Learn to meet the next moment without hauling the whole past into it. This is the art of appearing. Micro-practice. When you wake, sit for 90 seconds with your eyes closed. Breathe into your belly. Name one intention for the day in present tense language. Not a to-do list, but a tone. I will be clear. I will stay open. Let the day form around that vibration rather than your checklist. Key 3. Cultivate energetic sovereignty. Boundaries now are not just social niceties, they are energetic necessities. Sovereignty means you can feel currents without being swept. Micro-practice. Before entering a crowded space, imagine a subtle energetic skin around you, a clear membrane that lets signals pass but does not allow them to contaminate your center. Test it. If someone approaches with heavy mood, notice how your center remains intact. Adjust as needed. Key 4. Embrace paradox. The new field often requires holding contradictions, grief and elation, uncertainty and deep knowing simultaneously. The mind wants tidy answers, frequency wants spaciousness. Micro-practice. When you notice internal conflict, place your hands on your heart and say aloud 2 statements that feel true, even if they contradict. I grieve, I trust. Both are true. Hold both without needing immediate resolution. Key 5. Follow frequency over form. Let the inner tone guide external choices rather than the other way around. A job title might be less informative than the way you carry yourself. Micro-practice. Choose one decision this week to make solely based on felt resonance. It can be small. The food you eat, the person you call, the book you open. Note the felt sense in your body that aligns with yes. Key 6. Dissolve separation. The field of quantum Earth is less about individual heroics and more about relational coherence. Practice joining without losing yourself. Micro-practice. Once a day, connect with someone, a friend, a neighbor, a stranger, and for 3 minutes, mirror back what you hear, without adding advice. This builds mutual resonance space, which is exactly what morphic field activation needs. Key 7. Be comfortable with not knowing. This is perhaps the hardest for those raised to value certainty. Not knowing is not the same as helplessness. It is a fertile pause where new patterns can emerge. Micro-practice. When a question arises without an immediate answer, breathe deeply and say silently, "I do not yet know. I am open." Rest in that openness for 1 minute before moving. Each of these keys functions as a thread. Woven together, they create a garment that can keep you warm in thin places. None of them guarantee a replacement of all difficulty, and none are shortcuts to material gain. They are practices that tune your system to a field in which different possibilities become available. Again, think of this as resonance work, not magic trinkets. Now I want to name something tender and difficult, the liminal space. If you are migrating, you will pass through an in-between zone, neither fully in the world you knew, nor fully in the world you are shifting toward. This is where grief shows up. It might arrive as a sudden mourning for a life that, in some temporal sense, still exists. Old careers, identities, friendships, ways of being, these are costumes that sometimes must fall away. People speak of death and rebirth in mythic terms. I will speak plainly. There will be loss. That loss is often sanitary. It clears space for new embodiment. It is not an indication you failed. It is the passage necessary for a different kind of life. I should tell you briefly about my own passage, because narrative credibility matters in a field so saturated with theory. There was a season in my life when the ground of ordinary success, a steady job, a reputation in a local community, a set of relationships that had, on paper, all the markers of stability, began to feel like costume. I remember one morning, standing in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and hearing, with absolute clarity, a memory that did not belong to that life. A shore with a different sky, an architectural language that felt like belonging. The sensation was visceral, a contraction as if some old thing was letting go. Within months, friendships I had relied on drifted. Work that had defined my status evaporated. At the time, it felt catastrophic. Later, I understood it as a necessary death, not a punishment, but a clearing. It was also a moment of such deep rearrangement that everything that remained felt newly alive. That is the trade. You lose a set of props and gain a more intimate center. I offer that story not to romanticize loss, but to name the shape of the passage honestly. In the liminal, practices become anchors. There are small rituals you can do to orient yourself without turning to dogma. One I offer now is simple and symbolic. Find a small object, a stone, a coin, a piece of fabric. Hold it in your hand. Bring to mind one thing you are willing to release. Speak its name softly, as though you were telling a trusted friend you are going away for a while. Place the object somewhere visible. Each time you see it, offer a breath for the release you named. This is not a metaphysical contract that guarantees outcomes. It is a psychoenergetic gesture, a public, embodied signal to your own nervous system and to the field that you are enacting a change. If you are in the middle of this dissolution now, you may feel isolated. I want to remind you of a crucial fact. You are not alone. There are others, a small percentage, who are passing through similar corridors. They are not members of an elite. They are functioning as anchors for wider field change. The 1% is not a club. It is a set of nodes around which new coordinating patterns can stabilize. They act like lighthouses, not fortresses. We are approaching the point where choice becomes clearer. There will come a moment, sometimes gradual, sometimes sudden, when you must decide whether to lean into this reshaping intentionally. That choice does not mean cutting off ordinary life. It may mean rearranging it. It involves grieving, yes, but also naming what you want to carry forward. If you choose to step fully into higher coherence, your world will not become painless. You will, however, encounter different challenges. The test of patience when change does not arrive on your timetable, the labor of establishing new relational patterns, the responsibility of holding steadiness so the field can learn to resonate. Before we go further into what role you might play for the collective and how daily life looks when stabilized in quantum Earth, take a moment. Breathe with me. Inhale slowly for 4 counts. Hold for 2. Exhale for 6. Repeat that rhythm 3 times. Feel the body settle. Let the music of your breath be a metronome for the rest of this conversation. In the breathing, you are practicing presence beyond sequential time. In the pause, you are cultivating sovereign attention. You are learning the language of frequency. There is more to say about how these personal practices scale into morphic activation and how the 1% functions as a tipping mechanism. There is more to explore about the grief work, the precise shape of everyday life once you stabilize, and the ethical responsibilities of being an anchor without becoming detached from the larger human tapestry. But before we step into those territories, I want you to notice the tension that already exists within you, the desire for certainty, and the call toward a not yet nameable possibility. That tension is productive, not pathological. Hold that edge. It will be where your next decision is born. Hold that edge. It will be where your next decision is born. Let's step now into what it means to be an anchor, not as a title, not as a badge, but as a practical function inside a living field. Imagine a shoreline after a long, low storm. Scattered stones, driftwood, a buoy rocking. The buoy's job is simple: to mark the channel. It does not order the sea, it simply holds a position so the currents reweave around it. The 1% functions like that buoy in the morphic ocean. When a handful of people begin to vibrate with coherence, not because they have special pedigree, but because they have practiced internal alignment, they make certain patterns easier to sustain. That is how collective shift accelerates, through repeated, sustained nodes of stability. Morphic resonance, as used here, is an interpretive tool. Some theorists propose that fields of information persist and shape probability. Indigenous seers and visionary traditions have long known that human intention creates repeating grooves in the world. Read both as metaphors and possible mechanisms. When a person practices steadiness, presence, compassionate action, and consistent boundary holding, they leave traces. Those traces increase the likelihood that similar acts will occur nearby, and, over time, become accessible to others. This is not mystical elitism. It's systems dynamics viewed through a spiritual lens. Pattern begets pattern. So what does an anchor actually do day to day? The anchor's labor is simple and varied. They hold steadiness when things feel chaotic. They model how to grieve without becoming consumed. They practice financial and emotional integrity. They create rituals that enroll others into higher coherence, and they stay humble enough to learn from failure. Here are specific roles you might find yourself playing as an anchor, not because you were chosen to rule, but because your presence helps shape what becomes possible for many. First, witness. In tense moments, an anchor remembers to witness rather than fix. When someone is melting in grief, your first service is to remember what it is to be human, to sit, to let tears move, to mirror back presence. Witnessing is a quiet, high-impact work. It stabilizes fields. Second, translate. Anchors often practice translating inner states into practical language. You may find yourself explaining a spiritual compression in plain terms. I'm tired because my nervous system is rearranging, giving people permission to name their experience. Translation reduces shame and allows others to self-regulate. Third, repair. Not solving for others, but creating containers where repair is possible. That can be a circle that holds people while they tell stories, a trusted space to renegotiate shared agreements, or a daily check-in that prevents small ruptures from calcifying. Fourth, model stewardship. Anchors demonstrate integrity with resources, time, money, attention. They do not hoard power. They practice rotating leadership. They invite accountability. This ethos prevents the buoy from becoming a fortress. Fifth, propagate practice. Small rituals spread. A daily 5-minute breath practice, a shared check-in, a text thread where people post what they are noticing, these are modern liturgies that create coherence. They are simple and replicable. They are safe. They are neither secret nor exclusive. This is the moral architecture of being an anchor. Foster belonging, not hierarchy. Create patterns, not control. Invite others into agency rather than making yourself indispensable. If you hear 1% and feel an urge to build a castle, pause. The work of the field requires servers, not sovereigns. It asks you to be steady, teachable, and accountable. People often ask, how many anchors does it take? Is there a magic number? Systems are messy, but patterns tell us something useful. Sometimes a small cluster, a handful, a few dozen, can shift local probabilities. Think less of precise math and more of relational density. If you gather a few people who practice steady presence daily and who are committed to safety, consent, and non-coercion, you create a node that others can resonate with. From there, contagion of coherence spreads, not by conversion, but by example and invitation. Let me give you a concrete example. I was part of a circle that started in a living room, 7 people. We agreed on 2 rules: honest speaking and personal responsibility for our own healing. That meant no promises to fix each other, no grand profits, and a shared commitment to check in with a therapist when trauma surfaced. Over 18 months, our group's frequency shifted what we could collectively accomplish. We co-created a neighborhood skill-swapping network, supported one another through job transitions without collapsing into drama, and established an evening practice where neighbors came to sit in silence and read together. None of us left our daily lives behind. Instead, the field inside our immediate radius began to look and feel different. People walking past began to slow, to smile, to sit. Their embodied openness changed the likelihoods in the block. That is morphic work in miniature. As you consider your role, practical governance matters. How do you keep a group healthy and avoid cult dynamics? Here are practical guardrails I've found indispensable. Rotate facilitation. No one person should hold interpretive power indefinitely. Change up who leads the circle or ritual. Leaders should be trained to hand over authority gracefully. Require accountability. Create simple written agreements about confidentiality, boundaries, and relationships with outside supports. If someone's behavior becomes destabilizing, have a clear process for remediation that includes outside mediation. Honor consent. Rituals must be invitational, with explicit opt-in. Never pressure someone to disclose or to perform an activation. Encourage pluralism. Hold the view that different souls choose different timelines. Respect those choices. Celebrate multiple paths. Maintain external supports. Encourage members to keep professional supports, therapists, doctors, legal advisors, as needed. Anchors are not therapists. They are companions. Keep financial transparency. If funds are gathered, publish simple reports. Prevent power imbalances tied to money. These are practical structures that keep spiritual communities healthy. It is part of practicing energetic sovereignty at a social scale. Now let's widen the lens a bit. Suppose you have decided, even tentatively, to lean into this trajectory. How might your daily life shift? What does quantum Earth living look like in practice? Not as romantic abstraction, but as mundane, ordinary choices recalibrated by frequency. Morning. The day begins differently. Instead of leaping into email, you carve 2 intentional minutes for presence. This is not a long ritual. It's a signature that calibrates your system. You may set an intention, breathe into your chest, and feel for what kind of steadiness you want to invite. This single act changes the nervous system's set point. It is an embodied recalibration, not a guarantee, only a preparation. Work. Your work may remain similar, or it may change. Some anchors keep traditional jobs, applying new principles.
Fewer reactive emails, clearer boundaries around availability, a practice of pausing before responding to emotionally charged requests. Others find that the felt sense of resonance leads them toward crafts, teaching, community building, or roles that require relational intelligence. Notice that this is not prescriptive. You are not required to quit anything. The key is to follow felt resonance, not external expectations. Money. Financial life often becomes a training ground for frequency. Rather than promising prosperity, I will suggest practices that foster integrity around resources. Keep clear books, practice generosity in small, sustainable ways, and avoid getting swept by charismatic schemes that promise fast transformation.
Financial discernment is a discipline like any other. Make choices that reflect your values and your capacity for risk. Relationships. The relational landscape is where the transition often feels rawest. Old friendships may end, new ones may arrive. You will be practicing a new grammar of relating, more emphasis on emotional clarity, more permission to leave what no longer fits, and a deeper ethic of compassionate boundary work. Expect grief and also surprise delights, sudden friendships anchored in essence rather than history. Time. Experience of time will continue to stretch. You may find long creative bursts followed by slow days of incubation. You may finish major projects in compressed cycles. This non-linear rhythm calls for new forms of planning. Keep flexible structures, allow for rest windows, and make space for incubation. Health. Your body will report what it needs. Keep discernment. Seek medical care when appropriate. Use embodied practices, breath, gentle movement, somatic awareness, to help the nervous system integrate shifts. But do not abandon professional advice. Integrate practices with medical wisdom. Community. You will likely find yourself drawn to others, not to create a fortress, but to form practice circles. Start small. Begin with a weekly check-in call, a neighborhood walk, a shared playlist, a soup night. Keep logistics simple. These small, steady threads will weave into a safety net. Creativity. Many anchors discover that creative expression becomes not an afterthought, but a primary medium for coherence. Painting, songwriting, podcasting, cooking. These become ways to transmit frequency without heavy language. Allow your particular craft to be one of your gifts to the field. Now let's address something many of you are asking silently. How do I know when I am there? When is the migration complete? There is no single finish line. The shift is more like learning a language. Fluency increases with practice, and there are plateaus and regressions. You might have days or weeks of exquisite resonance and then weeks of heavy density. That variance is normal. Success is measured by steadier returns to your center, by the ability to grieve without collapsing, by the capacity to hold others with non-reactivity, and by the incremental expansion of your field's coherence. It is not measured in counts, followers, or bank balances. Let me be candid about pitfalls. Pride is seductive. So is avoidance. You might use spiritual language to cover over unprocessed wounds, or to justify neglecting practical responsibilities. Watch for that. Check yourself. Are you using higher vibration to avoid difficult conversations? Are you elevating mystery to escape accountability? These are common traps. The antidote is simple and demanding. Integrate practice with honest, sometimes ugly labor. Do the hard work of relationships. Pay your bills. See a therapist if trauma surfaces. The spiritual path of frequency is not an escape hatch from adult responsibilities. It is an invitation to bring full maturity into your inner life. There is also the danger of spiritual one-upmanship, where claims about sensitivity or higher states become means of exclusion. If you find yourself comparing notes as a way to ascend socially, pause. Practice curiosity instead. Ask people how their nights were, what grounded them today, what small grief they carried. Curiosity humbles and connects, comparison isolates. At this point, you may be wondering about evidence. How will you know this is more than wishful thinking? My answer is relational and experiential. Watch whether patterns shift in concrete, testable ways. Does your nervous system stabilize? Do relationships begin to include clearer communication?
Do small synchronistic events occur with greater frequency, not as fairy tales, but as practical nudges that help you act? Do your daily practices reduce impulsivity and increase discernment? These are the kinds of metrics that matter. They're not sensational, they are embodied. Let's return briefly to authorship and tradition. When I speak of Hopi, Maya, Vedic, or Christian prophetic mapping, I do so with respect. These traditions contain cosmologies that resonate with our present experience of field shift. They are not templates to be plundered. They are witnesses that human cultures have long perceived windows of significant rearrangement. If you draw from them in your practice, do so humbly. Credit sources, honor lineage, and avoid claiming to have discovered what they took centuries to see. Now, a practical segment you can use immediately if you feel called to anchor more intentionally in your neighborhood or community. These are reproducible actions for forming small nodes of coherence. The 5-minute anchor. Gather with 1 or 2 others once a day for 5 minutes. Sit. Breathe together with a 5 count in, 6 count out. Speak 1 sentence about what you notice. The regularity creates a habit that rewires expectation. The resonance ledger. Keep a shared digital note where anyone records small synchronistic events, helpful resources, or shifts in emotional tone. This ledger is not a prophetic scroll. It functions as a collective field memory that helps you track patterns across time. The swap table. Organize a monthly exchange where people list skills they can offer and what they need. This builds practical reciprocity and reduces transactional scarcity. The repair protocol. Create a simple 3-step process for handling conflicts. 1. Pause and avoid escalation. 2. Name impact without accusation. 3. Request a specific repair. Have a neutral third party facilitate if necessary. The ambient invitation. Create an open doorway ritual, literally an open table or chair in a public spot where people are welcome to sit for 5 minutes and be seen.
This invites strangers into small acts of recognition, expanding the field beyond your immediate circle. These actions are mundane but potent. They produce the steady, replicable effects that seed morphic shifts. We're approaching the decision edge, the point of inward commitment. You will have to choose, at various moments, how deliberately to align with higher coherence. That choice is not forever binding. It can be tentative, experimental, iterative. But it will require one thing almost always: letting go. Letting go of the script that says stability comes from status. Letting go of the idea that you can control outcomes. Letting go of the myth that spiritual advancement means the end of challenge. Now for a practice that bridges the inward decision and communal activation. This is an activation that is deliberately simple, symbolic, and repeatable anywhere. I will guide you through it. Treat it as a humble ritual. Do this sitting, or standing, or lying down, wherever you can be safe and undisturbed for 3 minutes. Place your feet on the ground. Feel the contact of your body with the surface beneath. Take a slow breath in for 4 counts. Hold for 2, exhale for 6. Repeat 2 times. On the 3rd inhale, feel a gentle lifting in the chest, a readiness. Now, name aloud, or in your mind, one thing you are willing to release. Keep it simple: a habit of people-pleasing, a job title that no longer fits, a relationship pattern. Speak the phrase softly: I release the need to X. Feel the words in your body. Let the phrase rest on the exhale. Breathe and notice any shift. Next, choose one word that feels like an anchor for what you are stepping toward. It can be steady, home, presence, light, companion, open. Say that word once, aloud if you can, twice if you must. Notice the tone, the vibration in your mouth, the way it settles in your throat. That single word is not magic. It is a signal to your own system and, if you choose, a small inscription in the collective field. If you feel moved, speak the word in the comments now. Not because the comment will force a cosmic outcome, but because visible practice synchronizes our attention. When you write the word, consider it a small footprint in shared space, a public sign that you are calibrating. If you prefer to keep it private,
That too is entirely valid. There is no coercion here, only invitation. Breathe once more. Inhale for 4, hold 2, exhale 6. Let your shoulders drop. Carry that word like a pebble in your pocket over the next days. When doubt arises, let it be your signal. When grief demands attention, let it be your soft orientation back to center. This practice is both personal and, if repeated by many, morphic. Again, I frame quantum as a metaphor and an interpretive lens. Some scientists use similar language to describe probabilities and fields. Many spiritual teachers use these same metaphors to map inner experiences.
Use this vocabulary to explore, not to replace grounded discernment. Before we close, a few compassionate answers to likely fears. If you fear elitism, remember that being an anchor requires humility. It requires voluntary participation in accountability structures. The 1% is a functional description, not a call to aloofness. Your service is to teach access, not gatekeep it. If you fear losing friends, grief is real. But you can grieve and stay alive. Practice holding your heart open to those who choose differently. You can remain connected even while rearranging boundaries. Some friendships deepen, others gently fade. Both are normal. If you fear madness or delusion, seek support. Keep your feet in both the inner and outer worlds. Grounding practices, simple movement, breath, and help from trained professionals are essential companions to spiritual work. No practice here substitutes for appropriate medical or psychological care. If you fear responsibility, you are right to be cautious. The call to anchor is a call to ethical presence. If you take on a role that affects others, do so with methods, clear agreements, and outside oversight where necessary. Finally, what does a stabilized day on quantum Earth look like? Let me paint a few scenes, not promises, but plausible sketches. Scene 1. Early morning light filters through curtains. You stretch, inhale, and feel the day's tone. You do not immediately reach for your phone. Instead, you take 3 breaths. You open your calendar and see blocks you chose with intention. A block for deep work, a block for rest, a block for a call with a friend who is tuning in to their grief. Your email exists, but it no longer sets your nervous system. You move through tasks with fewer reactive dips and more deliberate pauses. Scene 2. At work, a stalled project unexpectedly shifts because a meeting participant speaks a phrase that resonates with a pattern you've been cultivating. Instead of taking all the credit, you notice how collective tuning made the opportunity possible. You ask for equitable recognition for colleagues. Your work feels more collaborative. Your leadership is measured by stewardship, not command. Scene 3. You receive a message from a childhood friend who offers an apology. You accept in a way that acknowledges both the old story and the new boundaries you hold. The conversation is tender. You remain honest, compassionate, and clear. The relationship is not the same as before, but it is wiser. Scene 4. You encounter scarcity. A client cancels or a repair bill arrives. You do not avoid the issue. You meet it with practical steps. A call to a financial counselor, a temporary budget adjustment, and a request for help from a trusted circle. You hold steady, grateful for the support network you cultivated. Scene 5. Evening. You sit with a neighbor at a community table. You trade recipes, swap stories, and host a short 5-minute silence. There is music, low laughter, the kind that comes when people feel seen. You go to bed with the sense that small, repeated acts of coherence produce a world that, over time, feels kinder and more fertile. These scenes are modest. They do not promise utopia. They simply show how embodied frequency can refashion daily living into a steady apprenticeship in presence and responsibility. We are near the end of this transmission. There is an activation I want to give that ties together the practical and the prophetic. A final, short ritual you can use whenever you want to renew your commitment. It is 10 breaths and 1 word. Sit or stand. Place your hand over your heart. Inhale for 4, exhale for 6. Do this 10 times. On the 10th exhale, speak your anchor word aloud, 1 syllable if possible. Let it ring. Hold it for 30 seconds in silence. Then, choose one small practical action you will take in the next 24 hours that aligns with that word. Text a friend, open a ledger, schedule a repair, step away from a toxic conversation. The action is the translation of the inner practice into the world. If you have been with me this far, you have already taken an important step by listening, by allowing recognition to land. If you decide to keep walking, do it with tenderness, not because the road will be easy, but because you can cultivate steadiness and because your presence matters. This is not metaphor. This is selection by frequency. It is not a moral verdict. It is a description of resonance. Some will choose other paths. Some will remain in third density life by design or devotion. All paths have dignity. The 1% is neither better nor worse. It is a functional node whose stability makes certain possibilities more available to others. If you recognize the signals, if your life is rearranging, choose accountability, community, and humility. If this message has touched you, if it has named something that was already trembling in your chest, there are 2 practical steps you can take to sustain the work. First, if you found resonance here, subscribe to remain in this frequency, to receive transmissions that are meant to accompany practice, not to seduce or command. Second, for those who want a deeper system of stabilization, check the pinned comment for a link to my book, Beyond the Frequencies, where I lay out extended practices, group formats, and templates for building safe, effective nodes of coherence. That resource is offered as training, not as a promise. If you choose to share this with someone, do so gently. Send it to one person you think might recognize the signals. Offer it as an invitation. Breathe with me one last time. Inhale for 4, hold 2, exhale 6. Feel the tether from your chest into the ground and from the ground into the sky. You are part of a living field. You are not alone. Whether you are among the 1% already, or you are watching someone else move through this passage, there is sacred work in steadying your own vessel. Are you among the chosen? The answer is not a certificate. It is a felt sense that arrives as you practice being present, as you choose with integrity, as you grieve and keep loving. Listen for the voice within that says yes, and then do one thing in the next 24 hours that honors that yes. That small act is the beginning of everything. Go gently. Stay steady. We will meet again in practice.